So I am going to get started because I know our president, James Patchett, is doing a lot of things in the city, and we're really excited, James, that you joined us this morning. First of all, let me thank our sponsor for today, SL Green. They are building, as we know, many things, but a signature part of the East Midtown rezoning, which is One Vanderbilt, and I think in many ways really set the stage for new office construction in New York City with public amenities, plazas, MTA upgrades, public amenities. So it's really a great thing. So I want to thank Ed and Mark from SL Green for all they do for New York City. You know, it's been a long stretch. I think we'll hear hopefully a little bit from President Patchett in a minute about how we are. And by the way, I call him president because I learned yesterday from the mayor himself that he likes to be called president. But I think I'm just going to call you James because that's how I know you. But the city has really been extraordinary in just stepping up to the plate. And this is not something we ever could have expected, nor is it something that I think if 3 months ago someone said, well, folks, this virus is going to take over people and health and the economy and the way we live in New York, obviously we would not have believed it. So we've all rolled up our sleeves. We're figuring it out. We're learning, and we're making it happen. So I am going to welcome James Patchett, President and CEO of New York City EDC. James, I'm going to have you do a couple of words of welcome, and we'll jump right into questions.
Okay, thanks, Carlo. Well, I just wanted to say I appreciate everything you're doing and everything the Building Congress is doing. As I mentioned, I specifically brought my tea since it was called Espresso with Carlo.
Yes, and I, of course, have my espresso, so cheers. It is, espresso helps us get through the day.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say is obviously this is something none of us could have imagined 10 weeks ago, and it's really unbelievable, and it's really sad to see what's happened to the city. But at the same time, I have an incredible amount of confidence in the resiliency of our city and of New Yorkers, and I think you've been a part of many of these conversations, and we see it from leaders in the real estate community, leaders in the business community, leaders from across the board, their commitment to ensuring that New York remains the incredible place that it always has been. And I'm really confident of that, but it's going to be a challenge, and it's going to take a lot of working together to get there. But I am inspired every day by the things that I see. And I am hoping today that we'll have a chance to talk about some of those things, because I think that there's a lot of bad news out there. And I don't think the media is New York City's friend right now in terms of telling the story of New York. But I've been fortunate to see a lot of the amazing things going on. And I want to talk about that because I think we all need some positive stories right now. And of course, I also want to talk about how we get to the other side of this. So thanks for inviting us.
I love it. And I think the people listening, and my members have heard me say this since March. There is a lot of horrible news out there, but there's also some incredibly good things happening. And I like to continue to be on the positive end of that spectrum. So why don't you tell us, let's start with that. Tell us a couple of good things that are coming out of EDC and that you're working on.
Right. Well, thank you. I think, so we've been supporting the city's response to COVID-19 from the very beginning. We've turned our cruise terminals into hospitals. We've been turning to our local manufacturers to make medical supplies. And we've been working with organizations like yours and others to advocate for more federal resources for our small businesses and now for the city itself. I mean, it's been obviously an exhausting time. I'm fortunate to be healthy and have my family healthy, but I do have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old at home, which is my own mini challenge. It's amazing how exhausting.
I know what you're going through. I have one who just turned 5 a few weeks ago, so I get it.
Yeah. So it's, you know how that goes.
Yes.
And, it's also sad to see they miss their friends. They miss going out. And it's hard. But at the same time, I feel lucky because, I mean, there's almost 1 million New Yorkers who have filed for unemployment. It's unbelievable. And at the same time, thousands of our fellow residents who have died from this disease. It's terrible. But I want to talk, as I said, about some of the positive things. I've really been inspired by the innovation and the creativity and really just the tenacity of New Yorkers that I've seen. So at the very beginning of this, in the middle of March, we started by making face shields. So that was the thing. We reached out to local manufacturers. We'd heard that there was a shortage of protective gear for hospital workers. We built over 2 million to date, which is amazing. They're delivered to frontline hospital workers. This is in partnership with over 10 local manufacturing companies who were closed down. We designed these relatively simple products and delivered them to hospitals, which also put people back to work, which was great. In March, we spent about 4 weeks designing and building an entirely new ventilator from scratch to help deal with the obviously huge surge of patients going into the city's hospital. It was pretty remarkable seeing that process. We brought together innovators and technologists and modern manufacturers to build this product, which is incredibly complicated, but it all happened in a month, which to me is a story about what's possible when New Yorkers put their minds to things. And now we're focused on testing supplies because I really do believe that testing is the way through to the other side of this in the near term until there's a treatment. And so we need to be doing testing at scale. We have been developing in New York City our own testing kits for COVID. That's a 3D printed swab that's being produced by our partner Print Parts in Manhattan. We're producing over 50,000 a week of those. They're coupled with viral transport medium, which is being produced at Albert Einstein College of Medicine in the Bronx. That's something, neither of these groups had done anything like this. We reached out to them. We had some designs that we had put together. We've worked with them or that we had worked with partners to perfect. And so now we're doing more than 50,000 kits a week, which are going straight into clinics for testing. We delivered our first shipments last week, and they were the difference between those clinics running out of testing supplies and being able to do thousands of tests a day. And we're on our way to exceed our 50,000 a week target. We're trying to get north of 100,000 within the next couple of weeks. And I'm hopeful that in the next month, we're going to be able to talk about treatments and vaccines and what the next step is. We're fortunate at EDC to sit at this intersection of the public and private sector, and we've been doing a lot of work in recent years on the life sciences industry. And so the fact that we have that expertise in-house has really proved incredibly valuable. We've been investing in the tech sector and the biotech sector for years, and it turns out those are the two things you need more than anything right now, and putting those pieces together has been really valuable.
We've at the Building Congress started a focus probably about a year and a half ago on life sciences, and really talked not just about healthcare and the future of healthcare in New York, but I think you have to merge that in with the life sciences. Maybe talk a little bit more about how EDC has played a role in that, and how do we see it, this crisis, and how could it help us in the future?
Sure. So, we have been looking at life sciences as a potential growth, and we look at what's happened in Cambridge and San Francisco, and how they've developed these industries, and they've been such a spur for job creation and innovation. And I think it's really about thinking about the future. We've obviously we've been the financial capital for a very long time. Over the last decade, what's happened in tech has really exploded. Obviously, media is a huge industry, but we need to always be thinking about what the next industry is. And that's why we've been focused on life sciences, seeing it as an area where we have a tremendous area of expertise in our academic medical centers. We receive over $3 billion a year in NIH grants for medical research, and which in many other places translate into new drugs being developed and the possibilities for life-saving cures and also products that can create a lot of jobs. And so I think what we saw is an opportunity to build this industry in New York and try to, I mean, look, tech has proved incredibly valuable for the city, and we're so fortunate to have it. And life sciences is now proving incredibly valuable. So we're lucky that we've been investing in that industry, and I see it as a huge area of growth for the future as we get to the other side of this.
We agree.
I'm going to step out of frame for 1 second to grab my power cord, but
Do what you got to do.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I've been around long enough, and I know you have as well, and many of the people on the call as well. When people say, "Oh, New York is done, the city is finished, and everyone should just move to wherever, North Carolina or Georgia or Texas or Florida," or people move these days. And each time that people say New York is finished, not only is it not finished, but it gets better, right? We saw that clearly after 9/11. We saw it. I was in Red Hook when I was at the chamber the day after Hurricane Sandy, when people said Red Hook will never come back and Coney Island is finished. And obviously they've come back stronger after the Great Recession. I mean, I can go on. I'm convinced we're not only not finished, but we haven't even begun. And that the comeback story of New York this summer and going into the fall is going to be one of the greatest stories ever written about urban and cities and things like that. So tell me, give us a little bit about your perspective on that. I know we're not finished, but how do we come back? What do we do that makes it better?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, look, you gave the examples. There's September 11th, there's the recession, there's the fiscal crisis of the 70s. Yep. Obviously, more recently, Hurricane Sandy, as you referenced. We've always come back successfully. There were plenty of people who said they were leaving New York City forever after September 11th, and our population has grown dramatically, and we're at our 8.6 million people. So obviously, right. We have recovered from all of those. And if you look back to probably the most comparable circumstance, which was almost exactly 100 years ago, the 1918 pandemic in New York City. It was only 2 years later when we went into the 1920s, which was considered one of the most successful and innovative decades in the creation, the amount of culture that happened, and it was driven, frankly, by cities. And so, New York was a fabulous place to be in those times, only a couple of years after a pandemic. And that was before we had the amazing advancements in medical research that we have today. So, I have absolute faith that we're going to get through the other side of this. I mean, New York City is a successful city for a reason. I have at least some training in economics. And, when you think about these things, you look at inherent strategic advantages. New York is at the mouth of the Hudson River. It's the New York Harbor is one of the deepest on the East Coast. It's an enormous port of trade. It will continue to be that. New York City is a fantastic place. There was a reason the Dutch settled here in the 1600s and has been a major focus of trade since then. Have we gone through ups and downs? Absolutely. But are we coming back stronger than ever? There's no doubt in my mind. I mean, the desire of New Yorkers to go out to restaurants and go to bars is unrivaled in any other city, and I am confident that people...
I'm with you. My 5-year-old last night at dinner said to me, and I quote, "Daddy, can we go to restaurants? I'm just tired of eating home every day."
Yeah.
I think she shares the voice of 8 million people out there, which is let the restaurants open. But you're right. You bring up a point about the 1920s, James. The Building Congress is turning 100 next year, right? We were formed in 1921. RPA is turning 100. I mean, there are so many things that were created from 1920 through the mid-20s, from chambers of commerce's, organizations, cultural groups, etc. I guess they took that 1918 stress and pandemic and said, well, we're coming out of this, and this is what we need. We learned we needed organizations like these to help us going. So I agree with you. I think we come back stronger. Okay, so we come back stronger. The question I hear every day is simple: when and how? And you take an industry that I represent, which is building and construction and everything that goes with it. Historically, this industry, and from architects to engineers to contractors, et cetera, have led the charge in getting people up and running. How do we make sure that happens now? I know essential construction is going on, but the time has come for, I think, more to be happening in the city.
Right. So I think you're right. I think the when question is a really important one. The good news is if you look at the indicators now, they're really quite remarkable. I mean, we have, in terms of the test rate, we are down to about 1,000 positive tests in the city a day, which is way, way below the peak. And that is notwithstanding the fact that we have way, way more testing than we need. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry, I'm looking at questions that are coming in.
Okay. So anyway, we obviously we're making great progress on the health indicators, which is the most important thing. My really strong belief here is that we need to be able to reopen quickly, but we need to be able to do it in a very thoughtful and safe way, driven by science. Because obviously if this goes on for a very extended period of time, that's going to be a problem. But possibly an even bigger problem is opening and then having to shut back down. So, we believe that we will be hitting the indicators to go into phase 1 by early to mid-June, which is great. That means that construction can resume, manufacturing as well. And in addition to that, it would allow retailers to do at least curbside delivery. So there's a lot of things there that are exciting about getting into phase 1, and then over the course of the summer, going into the next phases of reopening. I think we got to work together with you all to get construction started in a safe way so that we can demonstrate to everyone how to do this the right way without incurring any further setbacks.
You're great. And I have to give a shout out to the building trades, because they obviously have played such a critical role in the construction that's going on, in the safety, in what's happening out there. And, look, we are an industry that is safe in many ways already. We were using gloves and masks and things before this happened. So I think we're ready to go. And I hear it every day more and more. We are ready to go. I want to touch upon another piece of the construction industry, which is the architects, the designers, the engineers. A lot of that work could be happening even more so right now because it's done the way we are, right? Working from home on a laptop, on the programs that they use. I know the city is in a crunch with cash, and obviously the economy has been really hurt with this. What should we be doing to make sure that we're planning projects, we're designing projects, we're getting ready, not just for the summer, but really for next year, when hopefully things will be back to a new normal, but when we really want to ramp up. So what could our members be doing right now?
Right. Well, I mean, I think I would say two things. The first thing is that there is no question that we need to be ready because there's a reason to believe that there may be eventually an infrastructure package from the federal government.
Yeah.
And as you know better than I do, that requires having projects that are shovel ready. We have more than $1 billion in resiliency projects in Lower Manhattan that are shovel ready or close to shovel ready. And we have similar projects all over the city. I think resiliency is obviously a really important opportunity to be in a position to make those investments, which are really long-term investments to make the city prepared for getting ahead of the next crisis. I think as much as we can do to work together to get those projects ready. And then that really takes me to a related point, my second point, which is about how to ensure that the federal government provides the level of resources that are necessary. And you all have been great partners in this, but we absolutely need the federal government to step up.
Yeah.
And that relates in the near term to a federal stimulus bill for municipalities and states. I mean, the city originally projected a budget gap of over $7 billion, and that number is going up. And that is a huge issue for being able to get through this, because as we all know, in a downturn, it's government spending that needs to step up. And if government spending is having to drop as well, and people are, government workers are not out there, with salaries and shopping at shops, and at the same time, we're not able to fund large scale construction projects. That is a huge risk to this city and to the economy. And so we need to be in a position financially where we can do that. And there's a very active conversation right now in DC about how to ensure that there's an adequate level of stimulus that goes to local governments. And we absolutely need that. We need your help in advocating for that, because without it, we're going to be in real trouble.
We agree. We've been spending a lot of time in DC the last few years since I've been at the Building Congress, but I think this year is more critical than ever. And, we actually, I think our federal lobbyists are watching us right now as well. And they hear me screaming every day about this, which is our number one priority as the Building Congress. Obviously, safety is a given, but our number one priority economically is for federal direct investment in New York and the region. And that includes shovel-ready infrastructure projects. And our argument and the argument of our members and other groups has been very clear. When you invest money in New York City, you are really investing in the country, because the role that we play economically is so outsized that investing in our transit infrastructure, our health infrastructure, our education, whatever it may be, has a ripple effect, not just in the region or the Northeast, but across the country. So, we are on top of that. I will echo something the mayor said yesterday in our meeting, which is Republican senators right now are very critical to our cause. And if anyone, and I've said this to our board and our membership, now's the time, if you have a relationship with a member of the US Senate who is a Republican, to call in any relationships you have. Because it's not enough to just hear, we need the money, but it's important to hear, by the way, if you're investing in something in New York, the steel or materials are coming from other states that are represented by Republicans in Congress. And that fuels the economies of Oklahoma and Texas and Tennessee and Washington State and places like that. So we are being very methodical on that. I am planning to get in my car in 3 weeks with my mask and drive down to Washington and see whoever will see me. We are still planning a trip the end of June for our members to go down there and continue to have the conversation. I do think the next 3 to 4 weeks will be very critical. So we're all in this together.
And I just want to underscore the timing issue here. And you heard the mayor say this last night, but I'll share it with you. The city is required by law to pass a balanced budget, which means a $0 deficit by June 30th. So if we want to see meaningful spending in this year's budget, the stimulus needs to happen before June 30th.
Right, that's the goal.
Well in advance, because we need to be able to put it into a budget.
So we have a couple of questions from our listeners. The mayor mentioned the antibody passport yesterday. Can you share more on that, James?
Well, look, I think that the premise of this, right, is increasingly the evidence is pretty clear, though it's still not perfect, that if you have antibodies, you are likely to be resilient to the disease. And that's great. And the estimates of the number of New Yorkers who are likely to have the antibodies, often many of them exceed 1 million. So that could be, more than 10% of the population who have antibodies. So if that's the case, that's a set of the population who is not at risk of transmitting this disease. And so that's a group of people that could be, could be safely going on transit, safely going into work with no concerns for their own safety. And that's a real opportunity. And to the extent that, again, testing for the virus is going to be critical to monitor outbreaks, but antibody testing is also going to be important as we think about, people who have likely immunity from this disease. And that's also going to be really important as we reach a point where, a significant number of our workers who can, basically return their lives to normal, which will be fantastic news.
Right. Great. A couple of questions on EDC projects that were already scheduled and bid out. Are you continuing those that were contracted prior to the outbreak, or are they being canceled and rebid at some point?
Right. Well, we're not planning to cancel any of them. I think the circumstances that we're in, it really varies by project. Obviously, there are some projects that were required to be shut down because they were non-essential construction. We had clear guidance about that from the Department of Buildings. There are others that we had to pause. As the mayor has said, the city has a bit of a liquidity problem right now, or a cash flow problem, I should say, which relates to the fact that there's just a substantial budget shortfall for the next fiscal year, and also borrowing for the city has been more challenging than it has been in recent history. So those factors together mean that it's a little bit harder than usual to advance projects at the speed that we want. And so what we're trying to do is be really thoughtful about how we go about restarting those projects. It's really only a question of budget. And if we can get the stimulus and get things moving again financially, we want to get all of those projects started and restarted and more.
Right. We like to hear that. We like to hear especially the more part. Right? More. I want to shift to Hunts Point Market. Obviously a critical piece of our city, of our lifeline, honestly. Maybe talk a little bit about what you see happening up there. And, they are a tenant of the city. Obviously, we want them to continue. They're part of the food supply chain. Maybe talk a little bit about what you're hearing up there.
Right. So first off, it's an incredibly important asset to the city. Hunts Point represents more than 10% of the city's food supply. And they supply supermarkets, bodegas, and also typically restaurants. One of the biggest challenges is that the restaurant industry is obviously in tremendous turmoil, and so businesses that are part of that supply chain, which include many of the businesses at Hunts Point, have struggled because they don't have their customers. So we've seen these stories across the country, which is that the supply chains need to pivot so that they can more effectively provide to the consumers that are actually demanding food at this time. So more than half of the businesses in Hunts Point, though, that typically sell to restaurants have pivoted their businesses to sell to supermarkets and bodegas, and also to other wholesalers in the market, and even to consumers directly. One of our tenants up at Hunts Point is now doing direct to consumer deliveries. And so this is a really important thing for these businesses, is to be able to be creative in this current business model. It's a demonstration of what I think is necessary nationally. People are consuming about the same amount of food. It's just that they're consuming it in different ways. And we just need to make sure that the supply chain is responsive to what it is that consumers are demanding. And we talk to them every day. We really want to make sure that they get through this the other side. And we've supported them by helping them get access to PPE. We've tried to liaise with them to get access to the SBA loan programs that are available. We've been trying to connect them to potential buyers for their products. So we've been doing everything we can. I think many of them have pivoted their business model, and we're going to see more do that over time. And also, as restaurants start to come back, these businesses will come back as well.
Right. Great. I want to, we have a lot of questions about construction and specific things to EDC, but I want to continue on with this because you mentioned restaurants coming back. Obviously, we live in a city where the restaurant scene is maybe one of the most important parts of what makes New York unique. They are small businesses mostly and are suffering. I think now is a moment for all of us to get creative on getting them back. And, we're going into the summer months. There's been a lot of talk about maybe relaxing outdoor seating permits and doing more street closures so restaurants can be out and about. Can you talk about a little bit how EDC plays a role in this and what you're thinking on your end?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the restaurant circumstance is one of the most challenging ones, right? I mean, I think that if you look at what's happened in other states that have reopened more significantly, most of them have put limitations on the total capacity of restaurants, and often it's like at 50% capacity, and just trying to, in New York, trying to make a 50% capacity restaurant work is really hard because they all rely on those crush times to make up the times when they're much less busy. Certainly for bars. I mean, yeah. I think a 50% capacity bar is a bar no one wants to go into,
right?
Except right now, honestly. But I think there are creative ideas that are being kicked around out there, and we're bullish on this idea of being more creative about how to use outdoor space, especially over the next few months. One of the fortunate silver linings of this is the timing here, which is that it will be warm enough for people to be outside. And so there's no reason people can't sit outside and eat at a restaurant. I think you need to be thoughtful about the health issues, but in general, being outside is a lot safer than being inside.
Right.
And so we are working collectively with our agency partners to try to get ahead of this problem. And hopefully you'll see something very soon on this topic.
Great, that would be great. I have to tell you, I represent the building industry in my job, but I think people sometimes forget that I spent many years running a small business association. So a lot of my neighbors will still yell at me, when am I opening my restaurant? When can we do this? So I hear both sides of it, and let us know how we can be helpful, because I do think the construction industry and the building industry can play a critical role quickly in getting some of that outdoor availability. And one of the things we've heard, particularly from construction workers on sites that are deemed essential and that are working, is, we're working, but we have nowhere to go get lunch anymore, nowhere to get coffee. And we feel horrible because the deli we support may go out of business because we're not able to go there. So I think as you reopen construction, and I would argue it should be at the beginning of June, not the middle of June. And I think you've heard that not just from me, but from many people. I think we have to figure out a way to open accessory retail that can be supported by construction workers being out there, because they go together in many ways. Mm-hmm. We'd be happy to help you figure that out. Yeah. Okay. Someone asked a good question about if we're talking about long-term infrastructure and planning for the city, is the city able to bond for long-term infrastructure to get things rolling, as opposed to just thinking about short-term things?
Right. I'm just making a note. Yes. So typically the city bonds on a 30 or longer year basis. That's our traditional approach. The capital markets have been, not surprisingly, unusual over the last couple of months, and so that has been a challenge. But I think one of the things that we need to figure out is how there can be a long-term, an ongoing long-term liquidity window that's available to the city. The Fed did open did open some borrowing for municipalities. Unfortunately, the borrowing window was about 3 to 4 years with amortization, which just really doesn't help. So what you need is a really long duration borrowing program from the Fed or elsewhere that helps support these infrastructure projects. I know that that's something that is under consideration to try to improve that. I think that's another area that's worth a focus so that people
Absolutely.
get what's necessary out of that. Because I think the reality is that the bond markets are going to continue to be uncertain for at least the near term, and uncertainty is one of the worst things we can have right now. As much as we
Right.
can, we need certainty and clarity about where we're going.
Right. Well, that's a good thing to push for as part of the stimulus bill. Another question, will EDC continue with completion of procurement cycles in the coming months? So for example, if there's a project that is pending notice of award, does EDC intend to make decisions on project awards and reflect that, or is that going to stop for a while?
Yeah, I mean, it's project by project. We certainly want to be able to move awards. As you said, as we discussed, we want to be in the position where we're shovel ready on projects. We but we also want to be clear with people and not make them spend money and get ramped up until we have clarity about the funding source. So that's the balance. I think honestly, we'll have a lot more clarity about all of these construction projects once we sort out what's going to happen with the federal stimulus. I think we are all hopeful and have good reason to believe this is going to get sorted out over the next 4 weeks, but it really needs to get sorted out so that we can give clear direction. And that timing will work well as, with the phase 1 restart, but we gotta, we gotta push for that federal funding in order to be able to provide clarity, because we'd be happy to do awards, but until we have funding, it doesn't do you all much good.
Right, we agree. Speaking of projects, James, tell us some of the projects that you're excited about that are happening and that we want to see continue to happen in the city.
Yeah, I mentioned, and I will go back to it again, the importance of resiliency projects right now. I think that's a really clear example where there's an opportunity to do large scale construction projects that will really make a difference. Lower Manhattan is an obvious place where there's the East Side Coastal Resilience Project. There's a series of associated projects that go all the way, wrap all the way around Lower Manhattan over through Battery Park City. This is billions of dollars of construction work that we are, have been planning to start construction on between now and the end of next year. And I'm very excited about those projects, again, because they're about planning for the long term. I think one of the other things, and as we talked about earlier, I'm very bullish on life sciences in New York City for a reason. We have we had, as of 10 weeks ago, about a dozen different projects in the hopper, everywhere from rehabs of buildings in Long Island City to ground up construction of projects in Manhattan that we're we're going to put millions and millions of square feet of additional wet lab space on the table. So I'm optimistic about that. And meanwhile, we're working on some important infrastructure projects right now, which include the Coney Island Hospital project, which is an $800 million project and is probably more important than ever right now, having new hospital facilities online. And we're also beginning the design work for a new public health lab, which is also going to be, I think we've all learned the importance of public health over the last couple of weeks, and having a state-of-the-art facility there is going to be really important.
Great, well, we're excited about that. And I know Coney Island Hospital has done a lot of work in the last few months, so they're doing great things. We have a couple of minutes left, but we're getting some questions about what will EDC be doing in terms of helping real estate and construction get restarted in phase 1. What role will you play in that?
So the role that we're playing there is really about trying to be the, trying to be the interface with the business community and the real estate community. Obviously, DOB is going to be incredibly important in this. As you know from our conversation
No.
last night, EDC, my team, I have been moderating and trying to help organize these conversations with the real estate community as well as with the business community and I think what we're doing right now is organizing a series of subcommittees on specific topics that are top of mind for people in construction. And so in one of those areas is a focus on how, as you know, how to prioritize infrastructure projects and what the city should be doing now, apropos of many of the questions you asked to lead off this discussion. And then another area which is really important is protocols. How can we be very clear? How can we be clear about permitting? How can we organize ourselves so it's not the red tape that stands in the way of us getting construction projects moving again? This is an unusual time, right, where we're temporarily stopped on some projects, and we need to make sure that we're able to move faster than ever. And so we're going to be organizing those committees in partnership with our agency partners, including SCA and DOB and DDC, and trying to get everyone on the same page to make sure there's an interface with the business community, with the real estate community, with the construction industry. I think the thing we really want to avoid right now, and which the mayor has really bought into, is that of all times, now is a time where we don't want to be government sitting off to ourselves planning. We need to be planning in partnership with the private sector so that we're listening to what their challenges are and responding to them, as opposed to just putting things out there that may or may not work for them.
That is music to the ears of many people, James. That is for sure. Before we close off, first of all, you have really done, and your team, incredible work. And to be able to watch an agency adapt so quickly to do things they really weren't set up to do. I think for the people that don't know about it, you should check out the website at EDC and see what they've been doing, because it has really helped save people's lives. I think I want to really stress the importance of all of us in this together, the partnerships between City Hall and city agencies, and what you're doing and what Lorraine is doing at DDC and SCA, and what Melanie is doing at DOB. I think this is a moment where we should all come together, and I see it happening. And I think at least for the next year and a half, we should use this newfound togetherness to really help do some incredible things in the next 14, 18 months that maybe we didn't think we were going to do before this pandemic. So it is an opportunity, and kind of that rare moment in time where we can say, let's run with it and do it. And you have our support, obviously, to get things done. So thank you. And before we go, tell us what you've been up to other than rebuilding the city. You have 2 kids. You're working from home, I assume. Have you ordered from any good restaurants that you want to give a shout out to while we're here?
Well, we have a fabulous burrito place that's right around the corner from our place, called Taqueria Miliar, which actually, unfortunately, it had a fire and was closed, unrelated.
Yeah.
But mercifully, they reopened, and that was our go-to meal about 2 days a week before, and we were in a real.
And where are they? Tell us what street they're on.
They're in Brooklyn, at the corner of Nostrand Avenue and Sterling Place. Anyway,
awesome.
It's fantastic, really. But I will just say they're some of the most traditional and authentic one of the most traditional, authentic Mexican places you can find. There's a mercy to have them reopen just in time for us to be shut at home. So I will say it's like you have more appreciation than ever for our small businesses.
We love small businesses.
And I do want to thank you, Carlo, for everything that you guys are doing, all of your amazing work and advocacy on behalf of the city and your membership. We've all found, it's interesting that you say a new form of togetherness. when we're all not together. But
Right.
I think we appreciate the opportunity to partner and find new ways to work together. We have to find a few silver linings in this, and I know
Yeah, we do. We do. Well, good. Well, James Patchett, thank you. Thank you, you and your team. Thank you, SL Green, once again, for not just sponsoring us, but for really doing amazing things in our city. To our members, our listeners, thank you. We're here for you. The Building Congresses continues to work for our members. Make sure you're on our mailing list. Make sure you're reading our emails that we send out. And I wish you all a happy Memorial Day weekend. Get outside, get some fresh air, wear your masks, and enjoy the city of New York. It's the best place in the world. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.